That's how it always worked out.
Funny little side note. So I again, you don't know any of this about me, but I won the Baja 1000 5 times in various classes, and like I said, have a long background in automotive motorsports and specifically off-road racing. But I have the most horrible sense of direction you could ever imagine. To the degree, like sometimes I walk out of a hotel room and I can't remember if I need to go left or right to get to the elevator and getting out of parking lots. And so people always joke with me, like, how in the world were you a desert racer? You can't find your way out of a paper bag. And my answer to him was always, I did really well in Baja, and I did well in Baja because you can only go left or right so far before you run into a body of water. And as long as you just keep bouncing back and forth down the peninsula, you get to your destination. So I feel with you there.
Right.
So
absolutely.
I listened to this first phase of what you went through, and I'm going to make a comment or a statement that ignorance is probably what allowed you to actually start this trip, because if you'd have known what you know today, my gut tells me you probably still would have done it because the results have been probably phenomenal for you. But when you looked at what you thought were the risks versus what they actually were, something tells me you didn't have a clear understanding of what you were doing at that point in time.
That's pretty true. And again, I described in my first book, I was on the plane coming over, and I was trying to imagine how it was going to go, looking down at, the vast wastelands of the Arctic, or there's nobody down there, and I was imagining I'm down on the coast of Baja, totally alone, and I just couldn't imagine any joy coming out of it at all. It was a very sobering moment, and I did have quite a few moments on the trip when I thought, what am I doing here? This is dangerous. I should be home in the pub. But I put so much into this trip. And I'd set up before I left England. I'd been on television, radio. I'd publicly declared I'm going to do it, and that really helped, because no matter how depressed or awful it seemed, or how depressed you became about something, you feel like, well, I'll just keep going, and eventually you get around the whole of Baja, and suddenly it becomes normal. That to me was my life, and looking back on it, I just think I didn't want it to end. It became very normal, and the strange thing was adjusting to civilization again when I finished it.
So you mentioned it was roughly 2 years. Was that you bussed or hitched to Ensenada and then walked out to the beach and started heading south, and you went all the way around up to San Felipe? Did you start and stop and fly back? Give us an idea of the timeline and what that looked like.
Well, I was discovering things as I went around, and I actually started in San Felipe on the Sea Cortez, and I walked south from there. And when I got down to L.A. Bay, or Bahia de Los Angeles, it was 115 degrees. I remember looking at a thermometer thinking, this is crazy. Why am I here in the summer? And then I started reading about Baja, and I realized that on the Pacific, which is only 50 miles away, it's probably pleasant 80 degrees in the summer. So I decided to switch coasts, and I went over to Ensenada and started walking south from Ensenada to eat up the summer months. And so that's kind of what I did. I did Sea Cortez, Pacific, Sea Cortez, Pacific, until I'd walked the entire coast. I didn't plan on doing that. It probably wasn't the most elegant way to do it, but it was the most sensible way.
So you started San Felipe, got to Bay of LA, and then went back up to Ensenada. Was that a bus trip?
No, I hitched a ride. And funny enough, every time I was making a journey back to the States, again, that's nearly what killed me. I got involved in a road accident. I was on a sailboat sailing back from Cabo San Lucas. We nearly blew up in the middle of the Pacific. We had a fire on board. It was like, just let me out, let me get back to the coast and doing what I'm set up and equipped to do.
Wow. So, and this was 2 years of your life?
Well, it was almost 2 years. It was just shy of 2 years, and I spent a lot of time. I was in no hurry. I'd get into a fish camp. I'd spend a week or two with the fishermen and help them with their catch and become part of the family. And yet, at first, I'd been warned by all my friends in Los Angeles, don't trust these people, get out of camp before dark. And I was very wary. I didn't know what to expect. But as I said, the kindness that I received as I went around, it was a joy to spend a week in a fish camp. And
what a testament!
Relax.
Yeah, what a testament to the fallacies and misnomers that we all have about people around the world. You know, and I hear that comment and think, man, how could there's anything remotely accurate about that? The farther you get away from the towns and the longer you travel on the dirt roads, the more special and warm and friendly the people are. So, testament to our misunderstanding of each other so often, you know.
Absolutely. I just found that on my kayak trip. I was, even this day and age, when everyone talks about Bajas being developed and spoiled and rotten or whatever they say, I still found in most places, I mean, I go days without seeing anybody on my kayak, loving it, just thinking, oh my God, dolphins, manta rays, this is heaven, whales, all to me, you know, all to myself. But the people, just the kindness and the hospitality again is still there. And I was going into fish camps that I'd been in 35 years before, and they still remembered me. And they were reminding me of things that I'd forgotten. It was really quite touching.
Okay, so I'm going to bounce back to some personal stuff with you. You had a girlfriend that you tried to convince to go on this walkabout. She said no way and left immediately, and now you're by yourself. And this was back in the 80s, so we're fast-forwarding, 30-something years, 25, 30-something years, and it sounds like, just again through some of the comments you've made and a little bit of the research I've done, there's more than one book at this point. There's more than one escapade or adventure in Baja. What does... And there's so many things I want to ask you. I'm glad I'm looking at the clock and seeing I still got 40 minutes left. But let's fast forward for a second. What is life like today for Graham? And then let's go back and talk about some of the. I'm curious about what were some of the scariest things? What were some of the best things? What were some of the most unexpected things? But more curious today. You're healthy, you're happy, and you're living in La Misión. So what are you doing these days?
Well, I'm writing a book. If I can get around to it, if I can put down the lobster and the beer and get on with that kayaking book. But I've been going back through my old photographs. Funny enough, very recently, back to looking at these pictures from the 1980s. And I realized I've got a wonderful record of life in the fish camps and some of the people I met. Many of them have passed, unfortunately, but I feel obliged to publish those photos, get them out to the people and, in certain cases, the families of those I met.
Did you meet Pancho at San Rafael?
I believe Cortez? I did.
Yeah.
And I believe he passed away recently.
He did pass away, yeah.
Yeah. And funny enough, I say funny enough, but I met him just before he died on the kayak trip. I stopped and we chatted away, and he topped me up with water and sent me on my way. And so I remember him very well. I don't think I met him in the 1980s because I think we discussed this, and he hadn't moved to San Rafael until after I'd been in that area.
I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah, I do remember going into San Rafael and all those San Francisquitos and Timba beaches and picking up water and whatever I was doing hiking. And I did pretty much the same thing when I was kayaking.
So, yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but you're trying to write this book. You're referencing a kayak trip, so something tells me you've now either tried or completed some long-distance kayak trip?
Yeah, because I had no kayaking experience worth a damn, and I thought, well, why can't I kayak down to La Paz and, again, stick right to the shore. Worst comes the weather, the storms. I'm on the beach in seconds, and I'm pretty safe. So that was that was how it turned out. There were some pretty bad storms to deal with, but I was usually out of them. But yeah, I've written 3 other books apart from the first one, Into a Desert Place. They all involve Baja trips, and I learned to live very simply and very cheaply. And my second book, I bought a burro and I walked it to Loreto in 1997. Well, I started the journey in 97. I finished it in 98. And
we lost him.
I did it because I was the anniversary of the founding of the Red Ocean, exactly 300 years before. And I'm very proud of the head and mother of the mission opera in Baja California.
Graham.
So the mission trail begins in Loreto as far as
Graham.
the mission is concerned.
Graham, can you hear me?
Yep.
Something happened there,
Yep.
And you broke up for about the last minute or so.
Okay.
We've got a clear connection again, and I can edit that out, but what I'd like to ask you to do is you started talking about buying a burro. And if you could just pick that back up, I'll be able to splice together. I'm sorry, but something happened with the internet connection here, I think.
Oh, that's okay. I'm just glad I didn't lose you.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Yeah, my second book, which is called Journey with a Baja Burro, I bought a burro and I walked it from the border from Tecate to Loreto. And I did this journey in 1997, started it in 1997, because the Loreto mission was founded exactly 300 years before in 1697. So I bought this burro, walked it down as far as I could, the mission trail, and 6 months later got to Loreto. And what I didn't realize, the burro I had was a good breeding burro, and he wanted to, at every ranch he came to, leave as many burritos behind as possible. And as a city boy, I had quite an education on that trip. And it was quite a contrast to the missionary experience and visiting all these remote missions all the way down.
Well, it sounds like you're maybe a donkey or a burro gigolo, or no? What would you?
Yeah. Enabler, yeah.
Yeah, enabler, exactly.
Yeah. So this burro, many of the ranchers wanted to buy him because they thought, oh, he's a magnificent breeding burro, and they'd bring all their females out. And I'm trying to get away and get back on the journey, and sometimes I just had to spend a whole day at a ranch while he serviced all the ladies.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, that was unexpected. But the journey itself was in the middle of the biggest El Nino record, 97, 98,
yep.
with nothing but storm after storm and rain and thunder and lightning. And a very unusual year to do the trip. Half the time I had to cross rivers where there'd normally be just an arroyo. So it was a very unusual trip, but that was my second trip. It hardly cost anything. The burro was the most expensive item on that trip, and I was sponsored by Tecate. At that point, I'd got well enough known. Tecate gave me a letter saying, give this beer all the, or give this man all the beer his burro can carry. So while the burro was enjoying himself, I was drinking all the Tecate beer.
Yeah, you were enjoying yourself. So I'm curious, this is, it sounds like at least a decade after your first trip. Is that right? Somewhere about that. And the first trip, we've established that you were incredibly ignorant as to what you were getting yourself into, and you were able to pull it off. And I love hearing that. Did you prepare differently for this trip? I mean, at least you understood about the weather and the time of year and so on. Obviously, no way to predict an El Nino year, but what was the difference between your preparation and or the experience on the second trip?
With the burro, you can carry a lot more equipment, a lot more food, a lot more water. And I didn't need that much water for the burro because it was falling from the sky like you wouldn't believe.
Sure, right.
And so I could carry maybe 4 days supply of water comfortably for myself. And it was a very different experience because most of the missions are inland.